Have you ever been turned down for a job? Not because you weren't good enough, but because you didn't have a piece of paper, a degree, a certificate, a credential that says, yes, this person is valid. Meanwhile, the person who got the job, mediocre, lazy, but somehow they had the right titles next to their name. Have you ever listened to a so-called expert, a doctor, professor, thought leader, say something completely hollow, wrong, or even dangerous, and yet no one dares to question them? Because they speak with a title, because society taught us, if it's certified, it must be true. We live in a world that confuses recognition with reality. A world where you could spend 10 years mastering a skill and still be seen as less than someone with a weekend certificate. You may have noticed it since childhood. The moment you scored low on a test, someone said you were dumb. When you questioned the rules, they said you were disrespectful. You weren't learning to think. You were learning to obey. And the system is rigged to reward obedience with medals, awards, titles. You didn't get A+ because you were curious. You got A+ because you followed instructions. Let me say something you may have never heard out loud. Your worth is not measured by how well you fit a broken system. Degrees, certifications, awards, they're not proof of intelligence. They're proof that you've been trained to perform, to conform, to nod, smile, and color within the lines. And when you don't play that game, when you challenge it, the system doesn't call you brave. It calls you a dropout, a failure, a nobody. But here's the thing. They don't want you to know. You are not less because you are unapproved. You are free. Because once you stop chasing their gold stars, you start building your own value. Real value. Not the kind that needs a stamp. Not the kind that fits neatly into a LinkedIn headline. See, most people don't fear being stupid. They fear being seen as unqualified, so they chase more letters after their name. They chase degrees not out of passion, but out of fear. Fear of being invisible in a world that worships credentials. But what if I told you those credentials are a lie? What if I told you the people at the top didn't win the game? They were born on third base and told us they hit a triple. What if I told you you've been conditioned to respect titles more than truth? Let's be honest. You don't want to be admired for your resume. You want to be respected for who you actually are. But the system doesn't know how to measure that, so it ignores it, discards it, and replaces it with a shiny badge. So if you've ever felt small for not having a degree, if you've ever stayed quiet in a room full of experts, if you've ever asked yourself, am I enough if I don't have the paper? This video is for you, because the truth is, that paper doesn't make you powerful. It makes you predictable. And real freedom starts when you stop needing to be certified, to be certain of yourself. But the problem isn't just about certificates. It's about the system behind them. A system that treats credentials like sacred scripture and punishes anyone who dares question its authority. You were born into a world that treats diplomas the way ancient tribes treated idols. You don't just earn one, you're expected to worship it. We're told, without a degree, you're nothing. Without credentials, no one will respect you. Play it safe, go to college, get the paper, then you'll be free. But look around. How many people with that paper still feel stuck, still feel small, still feel invisible in rooms full of important titles? The truth is, this isn't about education anymore. It's about submission. A 2018 Pew Research study revealed something stunning. 61% of American adults believe college is no longer worth the cost. 61%. More than half the country. But here's the kicker. They still send their kids to college, still sign the loan papers, still say, just in case. What if you fall behind? That's not logic. That's fear disguised as wisdom. It's obedience passed off as tradition. It's faith in a system they no longer believe, but are too afraid to leave. just like a religion, one with ceremonies, rankings, punishments, and prayers. Only this time, the altar is a job interview, and the God you're trying to please, HR. You dress up, you smile on cue, you hand over your resume like an offering, and you pray you're qualified enough to be chosen, even if the job pays little, even if you hate it. Even if it slowly kills your curiosity, you take it, because the system told you that's what good people do. It doesn't matter if you're smart, it matters if you're compliant. It doesn't matter if you think differently, it matters if you fit the mold. This is not meritocracy, it's mythology. And like every powerful myth, it survives not because it's true, but because it's sacred. You're not allowed to question the value of degrees. You'll sound bitter, ungrateful, lazy. Try telling people you didn't go to college. They won't ask what you learned. They'll ask what you lack. Try skipping the system. Watch them flinch. They don't fear for you. They fear you because deep down, they know they're stuck in the same maze. And if you escape, it proves they could have too. That's why the system fights back, why it calls itself the only way. And anyone who leaves is called a dropout, a failure, a risk. But what if the real risk is giving your life to something you never believed in? What if the cage is polished, but still a cage? They'll say, education is always good. But when did learning become equal to debt? When did thinking for yourself become dangerous? You're told, get a degree to be safe. But how is that safety when millions are working jobs they hate just to repay a system they regret? You wouldn't buy an umbrella for $80,000 because it might rain. So why spend your future on a piece of paper that might not even matter when the storm hits? This is not about anti-education, it's about real education. The kind that sets you free, not keeps you in line. And freedom begins when you stop confusing a certificate with your worth. But this rabbit hole goes even deeper, because it's not just fear that keeps the system alive, it's engineering, intentional design, built to reward the already privileged. Yale law professor Daniel Markovits called it out clearly in his book, The Meritocracy Trap. And the title says it all. Meritocracy is not salvation, it's a trap. We're told that hard work and intelligence will rise to the top, that if you study hard, stay disciplined, and keep your head down, you'll make it. But here's what Markovits revealed. Meritocracy doesn't level the playing field. It tilts it quietly toward the wealthy. The idea of equal opportunity sounds noble, but in practice, it creates a new aristocracy, one that looks earned, but is actually inherited. Let's talk about Harvard, the supposed temple of merit, the dream for millions of bright, young minds. Each year, Harvard accepts only 4 to 5% of its applicants. Sounds exclusive, sounds elite. But here's the hidden number. According to the New York Times, 45% of Harvard students come from families in the top 1% income bracket, nearly half from the wealthiest sliver of society. So tell me, is that merit or is that money disguised as excellence? Because when you're born into the right zip code, go to the right prep school, have the right tutors, the SAT isn't a challenge, it's a confirmation. You were trained for this, and that's the key word, trained. Meritocracy has become a grooming process, not for intelligence, but for conformity. For those born outside that world, you're not behind. You were just never invited. You weren't in the club, didn't speak the lingo, didn't have the alumni connections, or the essay coach, or the summer programs in Europe. So when you don't get in, they tell you it's because you didn't work hard enough. That's the cruel twist. They blame you for a race you were never allowed to join fairly. They call it merit, but it's camouflage. It hides inequality behind test scores. It sells the illusion of fairness, while rigging the game from the start. And those who succeed in this system, they're not always the smartest. They're just the most trained to do what the system wants. This is why Markovits calls it a trap. because even those who win are trapped inside it. The elite kids, they grow up anxious, exhausted, competitive, raised to be machines of success. Not thinkers, not rebels, not dreamers. They're trained to lead, but not to listen, to accumulate, but not to understand, to dominate rooms, but never question the room itself. And the rest of us? We're told it's our fault we didn't make it. We internalize the failure. We chase degrees we can't afford. We try to catch up to people who had a 10-year head start. And a map we were never given. This isn't merit. This is modern feudalism with Wi-Fi. The tragedy is, we believed it. We believed school was fair. We believed if we worked hard enough, we'd sit at that table too. But the table was never meant for all of us. It was curated by lineage, not logic, by status, not soul. And the more we chase their rules, the further we drift from our own brilliance. Because true intelligence isn't proven by a diploma. It's proven by how deeply you can think when no one's grading you. The system doesn't fear the dropout. It fears the independent mind, the one who sees the rules and chooses to write their own. So don't envy the elite, pity them. They're still in the trap. They just got better seats. But what if the problem isn't just in the system? What if it's in the soul of the system? Erich Fromm saw it clearly. Not as an economist, not as a policymaker, but as a psychoanalyst. He said, "Modern man does not live by what is right. He lives by what is acceptable." Think about that. We don't chase truth, we chase approval, not impact, but applause. And what's the ultimate symbol of social acceptance today? A diploma, a title, a shiny piece of paper that says, "You belong." From the moment we could hold a pencil, we were graded, judged, ranked, measured. We were told, color inside the lines, follow instructions, don't question the textbook, just master it. You weren't taught to wonder, you were taught to obey. And that's the point Fromm made. He called it the marketing personality. You shape yourself. Not around what's real, but around what sells. So you go to school not to understand life, but to win at life. Even if you have no idea what winning means. You choose majors for job security, not for curiosity. You chase titles for validation, not transformation. You don't read to learn, you read to pass. You don't work to create, you work to get promoted. And the irony, you think you're climbing, but every step up is another step away from your soul. Every certificate, every award feels like a step forward. But many of them are just golden chains. Chains that glitter. Chains that praise you. Chains that make others clap. But they're still chains. That's the danger. You don't realize you're being caged because the cage looks like success. And just when you begin to doubt, that voice kicks in. But if I don't have a degree, how will anyone take me seriously? That question was planted in you long before you asked it, conditioned into your bones by a culture that teaches you to prove yourself through paper. But let me tell you a story that breaks that lie in half. His name was Leonardo da Vinci. No PhD, no master's degree, no patent, no license, no formal title. And yet, he sketched the human heart with more accuracy than anyone in his century. He understood hydraulics before we even had the term. He envisioned flying machines before we had steam engines. He studied not to graduate, but to grasp, to see the world, not to get applause from it. He dissected corpses because he needed to understand life. He drew rivers because he wanted to know how they moved. He wrote in mirror script not to impress anyone, but because his mind moved faster than the rules of the time. He was not certified, but he was undeniable. Leonardo is proof that being matters more than having. He didn't need approval because he had depth. That's what Fromm called the being mode. Living not to own, but to experience, to know, to evolve. And that's what the system is afraid of. Not the dropouts, but the awakened. The ones who see behind the curtain and say, I'd rather be real than be approved. You see, Leonardo's power wasn't in his knowledge. It was in his devotion to knowing, not performance, not prestige, but pure, stubborn wonder. So next time you're told you need a title to matter, remember him. He didn't wait for the world to certify him. He became his own proof. But even if you see the system, even if you reject the shiny chains, there's still something deeper that keeps you chasing. It's not just culture, it's not just schooling, it's fear. Alan Watts called it the ego trap. He said, you can't discover truth while you're still trying to prove your worth. And that's exactly what the game of credentials is, a never-ending chase to prove that you're enough. You get the degree, and suddenly, it's not enough. You need a job title, then a higher one, then an award, then another, because deep down, you're still terrified that without it, you're nobody. You're scared your parents will be disappointed, that your partner will lose respect, that your friends will outgrow you. You dread the reunion invitation, because what would you even say? No MBA, no PhD, no LinkedIn-worthy update, just you? The fear runs deep. You think it's logical, but really, it's emotional. It's that childhood voice whispering, if you're not special, you're not safe. And the system profits from that fear. Colleges, certifying bodies, coaching programs, they all sell the same promise. Buy this and you'll matter more. You're not learning, you're buying reassurance. A CNBC report from 2022 said, 52% of American adults feel they're not good enough, even with stable jobs and decent lives. Why? Because they didn't hit some imaginary milestone, because they still measure their worth by diplomas and job titles. That's the ego trap, a game designed to make you chase so you never arrive. And Watts saw it clearly. He said, as long as your worth depends on external validation, you're not free. Because someone else still holds the keys to your value. You think that PhD will quiet the noise. But after the applause fades, you'll just need something else. The ego is never satisfied. It doesn't want truth, it wants attention. It doesn't want freedom, it wants control. And society weaponizes that desire by saying, here's a gold stamp. Now you're allowed to feel proud. But Watts flips it. What if you didn't need permission? What if you stopped chasing approval? Not because you gave up, but because you woke up. Because you realized you've always been enough, but you've been too busy proving it to feel it. You see, your power doesn't come from what you've achieved. It comes from who you are when there's nothing left to prove. That's not laziness, that's liberation. When you stop playing the status game, you gain something the game can never give. Presence, clarity, self-respect. You can finally ask yourself, what would I pursue if I wasn't afraid of being less than? What would I build if I wasn't trying to impress anyone? What would I learn if no one was watching? The answer to those questions, that's your path, not the titles, not the trophies. Those things can be taken, but real understanding, real freedom, that's yours forever. So if you feel that tension inside, that gnawing voice saying you still haven't arrived, maybe it's not because you're behind. Maybe it's because you're chasing the wrong finish line. And maybe it's time to stop chasing approval and start building a life you actually believe in. Because like Watts said, the moment you stop trying to prove you're enough is the moment you finally are. So what now? If the system is rigged, if degrees don't define depth, if credentials trap more than they free, then what does it mean to live a worthy life? Erich Fromm offered a map. He said there are two kinds of people, but not by title, wealth, or IQ. They differ by mode of being. The first is the having mode. People who live to acquire more things, more status, more labels. They measure life by what they own, not what they are. They don't learn to grow, they learn to impress. They don't speak truth, they repeat what sounds impressive. They don't live, they accumulate. And then there's the being mode. People who live to understand, to feel, to contribute. They don't ask, what will this get me? They ask, what will this teach me? They don't chase titles, they pursue truth. They're not focused on how things look. They care how things feel. You already know people like this. They may not have fancy degrees, but they carry real depth. They speak from lived experience. They ask sharp questions. They make you think deeper just by being in the room. And they don't need a certificate to change your life. Because impact isn't credentialed. It's earned in silence, in the shadows, in the choices no resume will ever list. You don't need permission to become someone of substance. You just need to switch modes. From having to being, from proving to experiencing, from climbing to creating. Alan Watts took it even further. He said, freedom isn't being recognized. It's no longer needing to be. Let that sink in. Freedom is when you walk into a room and no part of you is asking, am I enough yet? It's when you stop shaping your voice to sound like someone important and you finally sound like yourself. It's when your curiosity is stronger than your insecurity. That's when the shift happens. You stop reading books to sound smart and start reading because you're truly hungry to know. You stop learning to build a brand and start learning to build a soul. You stop networking to get ahead and start connecting because people matter. This is not passive. It's not soft. It's not quitting. It's the most radical thing you can do in a system that worships image. To live for truth, even when no one's watching. To build your craft, even if it's not on a resume. To study, fail, evolve, without a diploma to post. That's the journey of the free human. And it starts when you ask, what would I do if no one ever gave me a trophy for it? That question will scare you at first, but eventually it will set you free. Because when you stop chasing approval, you create space for something deeper to emerge. Your own mind, your own voice, your own path. So no, you don't need a degree to be wise. You don't need a certificate to grow, to lead, to matter. What you need is presence, courage, and the quiet power to live in the being mode. Because that's where real freedom begins, not in the applause, but in the silence you're no longer afraid of. If you've ever been looked down on because you didn't have a title, if you've ever shrunk a little when others bragged about their degrees, if you've ever sat in a room and felt like less because you didn't have a nameplate or a certificate to flash, then hear this and hold it close. You are not failing. You are simply no longer buying the illusion that the crowd still worships. You didn't lose status. You gained clarity. You didn't fall behind. You stepped outside. And yes, that will confuse people. They will ask you to prove yourself. They will measure you by rankings, roles, letters. They will ask, where did you go to school? What do you do? What have you achieved? But when you no longer live to satisfy those questions, you start asking far better ones. Who am I becoming? What truth have I found? What pain have I turned into purpose? And none of those answers fit on a certificate. That's why you're here. Not to reclaim some shiny spotlight, not to fight for a seat at their table, but to burn the table and build your own. We at ThinkMate aren't here to polish your LinkedIn. We're not here to help you win the old game. We're here to help you see through it, to rip off the label, to smash the pedestal, to unlearn the performance that was never truly yours. Because once you see it clearly, you can't go back. You can't fake awe at someone's title. You can't clap for hollow success. You can't envy the path you were never meant to follow. And that's your freedom, not earned, not given, not granted by a board of examiners, but claimed one quiet, conscious moment at a time. You'll stop chasing credentials like they're your worth. You'll stop waiting for someone to finally say, you've made it. You'll realize you've always been enough. Not because of what's on your wall, but because of what's in your mind. Not because of how you're seen, but because of how you see. That's what this is about. Not reclaiming lost glory, but reclaiming something deeper, the one thing society can't give you and can't take away either: your reason, your freedom. They can deny your degree, they can ignore your resume, they can overlook your profile, but they cannot touch the mind you've sharpened in silence, the voice you've shaped in truth, the freedom you've forged from within. And that's why you don't need their approval, not anymore. So here's your invitation. Step off the stage, drop the script, leave the costume behind. Live for truth, not titles. Grow for depth, not display. And build a life so rooted in meaning that no one ever has to certify it. Because real freedom isn't framed on the wall. It's how you walk through the world when nothing needs to be proven anymore.